Join us in the Bear Den, a real-life, real-love podcast celebrating the joys and challenges of parenting, family dynamics, and unconditional love.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Bear Den podcast. I am not your normal host, Matt Barré, if you can't tell by the accent or the hair, but I am his wife, Andrea Barré, and today we are going to have Matt in the hot seat. Welcome to the podcast, honey.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
So excited about it. Feels really weird to be in this chair.
It does feel very weird to be in the hot
power
seat.
might go to my head, actually.
It's power that you are used to, my love.
Well, I am excited for your listeners to get to know you a little bit more because I think you are an excellent podcast host and do a great job asking questions and interviewing your guests. And I don't think they always get to hear some of the great things about you. So
There's a reason for that. There's a reason why I'm the host and not in the hot seat.
well, today we're going to switch it up a little bit. So let's start the same way that you start most of your podcasts. Tell me about your childhood and your parents and your upbringing.
So raised in England, born and raised in Birmingham. For those that don't know where that is in the UK, it's right in the middle, heart of the Industrial Revolution, home of the Peaky Blinders, Ozzy Osbourne, and lots of other cool shit. So
Really good curry.
Home of a great curry. Oh my Lord. Best curry houses in the UK are in Birmingham. That is a fact. So born in 1984, my mother is or was a ballet dancer. She started ballet at the age of 4 and then moved into becoming a ballet dancer, then into being a ballet teacher. She had her own dancing studio. And she did that until her 50s when ill health and arthritis kind of put an end to that. My dad was a trained butcher. So he had his own butcher's shop when I was a kid. But unfortunately, due to the rise in superstores, supermarkets, and delis and stuff like that, people didn't go to the bakers to get their bread and the butchers to get their meat and the candlestick maker to get their candles. They went to the grocery store and just got it all in one fell swoop. So that was kind of the demise of that business. Then my dad did a couple of other jobs, but it was an interesting and I would say lonely childhood in some respects. I have 2 older brothers who are 16 and 14 years older than me. So when I was born, they were kind of already in their mid-teens. Within 4 years of me being born, both of them had joined the military at that point. So I kind of went through my childhood as a very only child, lonely child kind of thing. I would see my brothers at weekends when they would come home, but they weren't around consistently. So,
Yeah, you very much grew up an only child.
yeah, very, very, very much so. But I had siblings, And so mom and dad worked really hard. Mom would work multiple times during the week at different dancing schools. She worked for the dance teacher. She worked at her own studio, and then dad would work, during the day and weekends. So a lot of the time was just keeping myself entertained, playing with myself. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, so we didn't have, all the luxuries that other kids at my age had. We didn't have PlayStations and all the toys and all the cool clothes and that kind of stuff. So there was a little bit of, I guess you could call it now, looking back, there was a little bit of sadness in essence that I didn't have all the things that all my friends had and I didn't figure out why. I saw mom and dad working really hard, putting the time in, not making a lot of money. But I couldn't correlate at the time. I was like, well, if mom and dad are going to work and they do a job and they have a job, then why don't they have money? Why don't I have the shoes and the toys and the coats and the clothes that my friends have? And my friends' parents don't work; they're on benefits, but they have all these things. Like, where's our skin in the game? And so I wasn't really conceptually aware of how tough life was for my parents when I was a kid. And just like any other kid, I wanted things, I wanted clothes, I wanted stuff, and I just kept getting told no, and it was a compound effect of. So it was I was loved. I really was. My parents did a lot of amazing things for me. They took me around the world. We traveled. We would go a lot of times. We'd go on vacations to France and Europe. A lot of windshield time in a car, driving from campsite to campsite. But we saw France and Switzerland and Italy and all of Europe. By the time I was 16, I don't think there was a country in Europe I hadn't been to, which was beautiful. So I didn't have the luxuries of the PlayStations and the clothes, but I had the luxury of travel and time and experience, which looking back now, I would not trade for anything. You can shove the PlayStations up your ass. I want to go to see. And
you walked the beach at Normandy.
I've walked the beach at Normandy. I was on the beach. I was on the beach at Normandy during the 50th year anniversary of the D-Day landings. Yeah. So I got to sit down and meet with World War II veterans, Americans, French, British, who jumped on D-Day, who were on the beaches of D-Day. I got to see the tanks, the trucks. I got to see all of that. And as a 10-year-old at that point, I think I was 10 or 11. Holy shit! And honestly, I mean, I'm saddened now that at the age of 11, I wasn't as aware of who I was meeting and who I was sitting next to than I am now.
Yeah.
Just to sit down with, 60, 70, 80-year-old guys who jumped in on D-Day and saw all their friends killed, but they made it. And to sit down with them next on a park bench on a beach and not realize who you sat next to. They're just a vet. They're just a vet or an old guy. I wish I could. That's one time I wish I could go back in a time machine and experience that again. But being there for that, seeing all the castles and chateaus in France, going through Germany and Italy and all these experiences, it was, I wouldn't trade that for, like I said, the PlayStations and the clothes. I got a very, very beautiful experience from that.
Yeah, you did. So you were obviously very loved. You were loved so much that your parents named you after...
They named me Matthew, which I personally have shortened to Matt because that was a shit as a kid. So I would get Matthew a lot. I'm like, well, that sucks. So I'm changing the name to Matthew to Matt. But Matthew in Hebrew means gift of the Lord.
Right. And why did they name you Gift of the Lord?
My mom, after she gave birth to my middle brother Neil, was told that there was some complications. She couldn't have any more children.
And she didn't for 14 years.
She didn't for 14 years, exactly. And so in 1984, my mom went in to get a hysterectomy, and they told her she couldn't have one because she was pregnant with moi.
With you.
So, so being told she couldn't have any more kids to being told that she couldn't have a hysterectomy, she's pregnant. And so I was unplanned, unexpected.
And your parents have been married how long?
50 years next year.
How long had they been married when they
10
years.
Conceived?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were born in they were married in 74. I was born in 84. So, I was an unexpected pregnancy. There was, in my world, and not necessarily in everybody else's world, but in my world, there was trauma around that. I felt like I was very unwanted and unworthy and not meant to be here and not very loved because I wasn't planned. And I'd heard the story 1,000 times of, went in for a hysterectomy, pregnant. My brothers jokingly, through their own way, used to say that I was the adopted one and I was the mistake and all that kind of stuff. And that's it. That shit sits, quite honestly, and plants a seed. So I went through my life hearing that story, and then I went through growing up as kind of an only child, even though I had brothers. I grew up being bullied at school because of the lack of things that I had and the way that I was, and my parents being older and my brothers being in war and all these different things. And so I just had a really adverse effect on me. And it wasn't until through We Are the They and the work that I've done with that program and with Jimmy Rex and Melissa, the coaches, that I realized last year that I wasn't a mistake and that I was a miracle because my mom was told she couldn't have any babies and she had me, so I was a miracle. And
she wanted more.
She did.
And you and your parents are each other's love of their lives. And so you are the
I was the glue for
fruit of their union and their love. And truly, they each had other children with their previous spouses, but you were their miracle and their gift.
Yeah, and it's funny, you know, when you set your mindset in a way and you believe something which isn't truth, but to you it is, you neglect to see everything else around you. And you actually brought this to my attention when I was kind of going through this and having these breakthroughs and figuring this out, where you said to me, you're like, babe, have you ever looked or heard the way your parents speak to you? And I'm like, yeah. And you're like, have you really listened? They're like, they always call you our Matthew. They always call you their, you know, their little boy, their baby boy, their soldier, whatever,
Special son.
their special son. And I'm like, I have never heard them say that. And then I think I was cleaning my office and I went through a stack of like old birthday cards and letters and stuff that my mum had got me. And every one of them was like, our dear boy, our darling Matthew, our dearest Matthew, love mum and dad. And I was like, the writing's been on the wall all the time.
Yes.
I just neglected to see it because of what I believed.
Yeah. You were looking through a different filter.
Oh, absolutely. I was looking I was looking through a different filter. And so when I realized that, I was like, well, you know what? I'm not a mistake. I'm a fucking miracle to change the narrative.
Yes,
and so that was done.
Yes,
so, yeah.
So then you moved from Birmingham when you were, what, 16?
16, yeah.
So from the second biggest city
biggest city, yeah.
to...
Middle of fucking nowhere.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so at 6, so grew up born and raised in the second biggest city in England. A lot of friends. I went to at the time, it was the largest high school in Europe for size and children and teachers. I think it had about 4,000 students, about 2,000 faculty. One of the largest high schools in Europe. So I had a lot of friends. And then my mum and dad had both retired through ill health. My dad had had 5 heart attacks in 4 weeks when I was about 13 or 14, I think, or even younger maybe. So he was kind of done medically. My mum had got arthritis, so the dancing school was kind of winding down. And we lived in a 2-story house, and they were struggling to get up and down the stairs with their illnesses. So they decided to sell up and buy a little single story in the middle of nowhere. In 1999, they saw the house, fell in love with it, bought it, and we moved in 2000 after I'd finished high school. So I literally finished high school in June, I think like June 20th in 2000, and by like June 27th we'd moved to Norfolk. And it was night and day.
Yeah.
It was night and day. You know, you got to imagine, you know, if anybody grows up in a city, you know, you walk around the corner, you can get on the bus, you can get a cab, the stores are right there. We lived in a little village that was 4 miles away from the local town, 17 miles of fields behind my mum and dad, a river on the other side of the road.
And you were a couple of miles into the
couple of miles into the little village and out of the town. Yeah, it took like 20 minutes to get into the little village and probably an hour to get into town. So it was a big culture shock. Really big culture shock. So we moved. They were extremely happy with the house. It was kind of what they wanted and they loved it. I was kind of torn because I'd lost all my friends that I'd grown up with and had known since I was a kid, you know, a baby in essence. But my path was already for me to join the military at that point, so it made no difference. So I did a year at home with them, and then I joined the military in 2001. And
you were in the military for 10 years.
Yeah, so joined up.
Or actually 11 years, really.
11 years, yeah. Joined up in 2001, December the 12th, 2001 was when I joined up. That was my first day. That was my date of, we call it the date of attestation. That's the day I pledged my oath of allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen. And then I did 10 years from there and retired in 2011.
And how was that experience?
It was great. It was honestly the best thing I've ever done in my life. I made amazing friends. I did things that I could never imagine that I would ever do. I wasn't very smart at school. I didn't apply myself academically ever. And again, that's a self-worth thing. I didn't feel worthy of an education, so I just fucked around and became the class clown. And for many different reasons, people don't punch you as hard if you can make them laugh, so make them laugh. And so I kind of joined the military, and it was great. I went to trade school for 2 years back in Birmingham, where I got a degree in aeronautical engineering, became an avionics engineer, and then went to my first base, which was 10 minutes from my parents' house in the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere.
where I stayed for 10 years.
Yeah.
So anywhere in the world, this was literally my last day in training. They're like, okay, anywhere you want to go, son, any aircraft you want to work on, any base in the world, you let us know, we'll send you there. I'm like, great. So I literally wrote down fast aircraft anywhere. And they sent me fast aircraft 10 minutes from my parents. And that's where I stayed for 10 years, which looking back was a blessing because I was close to my parents.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. I got to fix planes like every day. I got to work with great guys. I got to learn how to play rugby, see the world. I've played rugby in South Africa, in Europe, all over the UK. Went to Iraq, went to Afghanistan, went to the Middle East, went to South Africa playing rugby. Just did all these amazing, crazy things that only kids should do in the military. So yeah, it was great.
And why did you leave the military?
Because of a girl.
Not this one.
Because of a girl. No, it wasn't you. So in 2008, I just finished a deployment in Iraq, and I'd come home, and they were sending the asset that I worked on to Afghanistan, and so we were doing a deployment to Tucson to do a training exercise for 10 weeks, preparing to go to Afghanistan, and so I came over. There was two of us that came over on the deployment with the squadron, and while we were in Tucson, I met a girl in a bar. We hit it off. We saw each other through the rest of my deployment, and then we committed to long-distance dating once I'd left. And then I think it was 2 years after that, or 2.5 years after that, I'd kind of come up to a natural place in my career where I could get out of the military, terminate my service. And so I did. I terminated my service. I'd been away a lot. I'd been away 5 times at that point. It was a heavy burden. I was kind of mentally exhausted of just being
deploying
in the desert.
to the Middle East. Away, when you say away.
Yeah, sorry, away. Yeah, I've been
East.
to the middle. I just finished my 5th tour in 5 years. So I was just kind of done.
Yeah.
And so I made the commitment to leave, gave up everything in the UK, sold all my stuff, belongings and car and Xboxes and clothes, and packed a couple of Foot Lockers and came to the US and got married, which didn't work out.
And that's okay. As you were going through that, I mean, ultimately, looking back, you were going through culture shock at the same time as you were going through PTSD, as the same time as, I mean, there was a culture shock of being in a new country, as well as no longer being in the military. Because I believe that exiting service members go through a culture shock, adjusting into civilian life.
Just
so talk
normal
through those.
life. Yeah. Just normal life. Like the craziest thing of like having the option to pick out the clothes you want to wear. I'd spent 10 years of wearing the same suit every day. You know, blue pants, blue shirt, black shoes, hat. That's what I wore every day. And if I wasn't wearing that, I was wearing a light blue shirt. And if I wasn't wearing that, I was wearing camo.
Right.
The only time I wore my own clothes was in the evenings and weekends. Yeah. And so, you know, having that culture shock of like, I have the flexibility and the ability to wear whatever I want. I don't have to shave. I don't have to do this. I don't have to get up at this time. Like it was you lose the routine. Right. And so I floundered for a long time, just spinning like, where am I? Where's my place in this world? I don't know. And then you compound that with moving to a different country, leaving all your family and friends behind, not knowing anybody, different culture, trying to get a job.
And you weren't able to work in your chosen career because, and even then you weren't able to work in your career because you had to be a citizen.
Because I wasn't an American citizen. Yeah, I'd been offered a job by Raytheon, very well-paying job with the skill set that I had, but because I wasn't a citizen, they couldn't take me on.
Right.
And so again, there becomes a self-worth thing of, well, I know all this stuff that I can do, but I can't do any of it because I'm not a citizen. So what's the point? I was very grateful, and I had the opportunity to get a job quite quickly with a friend of mine doing some property preservation on foreclosed properties, because this was 2011, right after the economic bubble. And so a lot of foreclosures. So I was working like $10 an hour, 18-hour days, 5, 6, 7 days a week. And it was, to be honest, it was fucking miserable. Yeah. Because, you know, when you have a career and you're very good at what you do, and that there's a limited number of people that can do what you do, and you do that for a long time at a very high level, and then all that gets taken away from you, and all of a sudden you become a janitor. that has a huge impact on your self-worth.
Yeah.
And when you already have self-worth problems, then you can imagine where that leads you. So,
well, I think you compound that with the PTSD. I mean, when you and I eventually got together, you were still struggling not being able to handle fireworks or having nightmares. I think it came to a head at one point when you were trying to tell me how to load a dishwasher, and I lost it.
men, do me a favor, never mansplain anything to your wife.
I think the exact words that I said to you were, I have been successfully living as an adult for a lot longer than you have. You need to get this taken care of. And it was understandable. You had spent a decade surrounded by people who were taught to think exactly like you, and not having that anymore is hard. So you eventually did get some help for that. How was that experience?
It was tough. I think it's always tough when you start to become vulnerable with anybody. I couldn't for the longest time wrap my head around. And just to put it into context, both my brothers are in the military. My middle brother, Neil, who I'm really close with, he and I have done a lot of projects together, working on his house and, kind of stuff like that. But he's also ex-military. So he and I just, we'd be working on his house, and if I needed a hammer, I'd turn around and he'd have it in his hand, ready to hand to me, and vice versa. We just knew what was needed when and exactly, So when you work with people like that for 10 years, because that's the way you're trained, that's the way you're systemized, when you don't have that, and you turn to the person who is your person, i.e. you, and I turn around and I'm expecting something to be there and it's not, I'd get frustrated. I'm like, well, what the fuck? I need the dishcloth. I'm doing the dishes. Pass me the damn cloth. And you're like, you can also use your words and ask for it. There was an expectation of like, I expect something to be there because I've been used to that. And so I would get really frustrated with you and the kids. I'm like, why don't you know that this is what I need? And at one point you were like, because we're not fucking mind readers, Matt, tell us.
Yeah, and also I had different opinions on how things should be done.
And that too, the way I load a dishwasher.
And I had been running a household a lot longer than I had known you.
1,000%. And like you said, my way of loading the dishwasher isn't necessarily the right way or your way. And so we hit heads quite a lot when we were early married, until I really figured out that like I'm putting expectations on people who don't deserve to have expectations put on them. And I still struggle with it now. We've literally just worked through this weekend with my obsession with the kids' rooms being clean. And I struggle with that. But we've had a beautiful conversation this weekend and we figured that out. And so that's something not even 10, how long have I been out of the military? When did I leave? 2013. So 11 years.
Longer than that. We've been together 10.
Yeah. So I left so it's been, nearly 11. Yeah. 2011 I got out. So 12, 13 years now. It's taken me 13 years to figure out to let people have their room be messy. But it's just something that just gets beaten into you time and time and time again. So,
So we go through all that, and then suddenly you become a dad.
Yep. It's freaking amazing. It is amazing. Yeah, I became a dad to Lily and Anna, and I love it. It's the best job I've ever had. It was, I'd always wanted kids, and, meeting the girls, it was just this perfect full package. I had everything. I got this woman that I loved, and I adored, and these two kids that were funny and I could goof around with, and I could parent a little bit. And, we've talked about the struggles that we've had in the beginnings with, wanting to be a dad, but couldn't be their dad. But just becoming a dad is freaking awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And it's the best job that I have, and I'm grateful for it every day. I get to encourage these little ladies of what they can do and what their possibilities are. And it's amazing, but it wasn't easy. No. It wasn't easy. I had some struggles and some dealings and some pushback and all those sort of things. But being a dad is the best thing I can ever imagine doing. What
do you feel from your childhood or from your parents that do you bring into being a dad now?
Oh, that's a really great question. The one thing that my parents always did, and I love them for, is they were always teaching me stuff. like random knowledge. I have the world's largest encyclopedia of bullshit in my head. It's on.
You are a lifelong learner for sure. I love that about you.
But it's stuff that it's never going to be any use. I'm like, did you know that the common housefly takes off backwards? And people are like, why the fuck do you know that? I'm like, why don't you? Everybody should know this.
Because their dad's not Glenn Barré.
Have you ever tried swatting a fly? That's why you don't do it, because you go from behind. They take off backwards. But no, just little things like that. And I also truly believe that the one thing that I'm very, very, very thankful for from my parents is my passion for the arts. You know, with my mom being in ballet, you know, I would go to her dancing school as a kid, and I'd have to sit there in the corner and watch her teach while I'm coloring books, whatever, because they couldn't afford daycare. And so I would just sit there and watch my mom teaching these kids ballet. And to me,
and your dad was in a band, and your dad.
No, it's my uncle. My granddad. My granddad was a musician. He was in an orchestra. My dad's dad was in an orchestra. My mom's dad was a classical pianist and played the church piano or the church organ and had recorded some music. And so there was a lot of music in the family. My mom and dad actually don't play instruments. The music skipped my parents completely. But yeah, so, you know, my mom with the ballet, I got to see her in that world, and I got to appreciate ballet, which now, you know, one of the favorite things that you and I do, and you and I and the kids do, is every Christmas we go see the Nutcracker. We love the ballet. My parents are really fond of music, classical music, 40s, 50s, 60s music, because that's the era they were born in. So I know a lot of that music from that era. I know a lot of classical music, and I appreciate it and I love it. I get that from them. My dad is a huge television and film buff, so I got a lot of appreciation for television, film, and from them as well. So I just think I have this really fine appreciation for things that not many people appreciate anymore. You know, a lot of people our age don't find enjoyment of going to the ballet.
Right.
A lot of people our age don't find enjoyment from going to theater or sitting at a show. You know, some of the best dates that we've ever been on are going to the movies or going to the theater or going to the ballet or going to see like Andrea Bocelli in concert or going to see Nutcracker. Going to the Candlelight Symphony and you know, those kind of things, like that's what I really enjoy. And I don't get that from anybody else but my parents.
I love that.
Yeah. So I'm very, very grateful for that.
What do you hope our girls take from you?
The accent.
They do call it the bin. They do call it the bin. What else do they say? They did. There was a time in their life that they did have a bit of an accent.
They did. They used to call it tomato for the longest time.
Yeah, they did.
In fact, Lily, our eldest, we went to one of her school meetings, I think it was, and this was back years and years and years ago. So the three of us went, myself, Andrea, and the girl's biological father. And so Andrea, their dad, was sat kind of in the front and I was sat behind you. And I remember this teacher's like, well, Lily's doing really great at school. She goes, but we are a little concerned. There are a couple of words that she's saying that are very weird and strange. We don't know where she's getting them from, but we just want to bring it to your attention. She says the word rubbish. She says the word bin, and she says the word tomato. And I started laughing and you just went, oh, that's his fault. Yeah. And the teacher looked at me and I went, I'm British. She's like, oh, that makes sense. We're good.
Our poor kids, they had a little bit of a speech impediment because I mumble and talk really fast and mumble. You have an accent. And then we had our German family over for a couple weeks every year too. They didn't know what was up or down. They did not
know what was upside or down.
But aside from the accent, what would you like the girls to take from?
So I would say culture is huge. And for both of us, you know, you lived in Germany for a year. You have a big tie to Europe. Obviously, so do I. So teaching our girls culture and to be accepting of every culture, every race, and every religion. Growing up in England, growing up in Birmingham, I went to school with Hindus, Sikhs, Jews, Christians, Jehovah's Witnesses, you name it, you know, pretty much every religion, Buddhists. I can probably name you a friend or a person in my life that has been a part of every religion. Right. And so there is no one religion for me. I am very accepting of all religions. I've celebrated all religions. I have celebrated the Muslim faith, you know, in Afghanistan and Iraq. So I really hope that our girls take from us the acceptance of difference. that race, religion, where you live, location doesn't make you different. It just makes you special. And so I really hope that they lean into that of accepting everybody for who they are, and they take time to dig into that of like, what does that religion look like? How does that religion differ from ours? How can we accept that? But then also the same with cultures, countries, foods, languages, just really be worldly, open and open-minded. That's all I hope they get from both of us.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think we're probably wrapping up on time.
Yeah.
Am I right? So let's end this.
You tell me, it's your podcast.
I don't know.
You can roll
I
this.
don't even know what time it is.
You can roll this as long as you want. You can keep going. We keep
Let's
rolling.
keep going. Okay.
Do whatever.
What
It's your show. You're the
it's
boss.
I mean, I like to be the boss.
Oh, we know.
What is your favorite part about being a parent?
What is the favorite part about being a parent? Honestly, watching the kids figure shit out.
Okay. Expand on that.
Well, I love it when our daughters lean into us because they need advice, they need help, they want assistance. But I also really love just watching their minds work and figuring it out. And I really do mean this. Even if they get it wrong, even if they attempt something and they get it wrong, but they gave it a really good try, and you can see their thinking behind it of like, I thought this would work and I tried it, but it didn't. That's what I love. I'm like, okay, you're critically thinking about this. Sure, it didn't work out, but let's give it another go. That's what I really love about our kids is they are so, I'm going to figure this out before I ask for help. Yeah. Sometimes they get lazy and they ask for help, and I'm like, no, figure it out. You can do it. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. But really, they are really in tune with figuring it out.
I love that.
Yeah, and that's really powerful for me. I love watching them do that.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you've been doing this podcast now, it's 4 months, 5 months?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
What has been your biggest takeaway as being the host of a podcast on parenting and families? And
honestly, there's no set description for what a family should look like, how a family should act, a religion a family should be in. I've interviewed guests on here that are, Mormon or LDS, atheist, there's no set plan for a family. And I think some of the most beautiful families and stories that I've heard have actually come from the darkest traumas, And so I don't think from the people that I've interviewed and the people that I have yet to interview that I know of, our trauma doesn't define us. And some of the most impactful parents that I've met or know are people that have gone through trauma, figured it out, had help, asked for help, had help, and are now absolutely rocking the parenting scene. So I think the biggest thing that I've just learned from this podcast is everybody's doing a fucking great job. Yeah. Whether you think you are or not, you're doing a great job. Your kids are healthy. Your kids are safe. They've got a roof over their head. They've got clothes on their back and they've got food in their belly. Try and tell me you're not doing a great job. If you can check every one of those boxes, you're doing a great job. If your kids know that you love them, don't give a shit what anybody else says. You're doing a great job.
I love it. So what's next for Matt and for the podcast? I don't know when this is going to release, but we're coming up on the end of the year. Yeah. So what's next?
What's next for the podcast, or what's just next?
Let's start with the podcast, and then we'll ask for Matt.
The podcast it's for me. I just want to keep growing this platform. I want to keep growing this environment for people to feel safe to share their story. We've had a couple of guests on the show who it's been maybe the first or second time that they've aired some of the things that have happened to them in the past. So I just want it to continue to be a safe space for people to come and talk. I'm also kind of in this flow where it doesn't always have to be about parenting. It doesn't always have to be about families. If people want to come on the podcast and share stuff that has nothing to do with that, but it's something that they feel comfortable talking to me about, and this is the platform they want to use, then I'm not going to turn you away just because this is meant to be a parenting podcast, So it's to be committed. I want to streamline this a little better. Because, right at the very beginning, you kind of fly by the seat of your pants, done's better than perfect, but now it's being done and now it's time to make it perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So just streamlining it to give the guests more opportunity to be on and give us more range of guests. So that's the plan for 2024 on this. It's not going anywhere, and we're going to keep it rolling and keep digging in and bring on more guests. And the more guests that I have that give great content for people to listen to, it entices more people to come on and be open. So yeah, just keep rocking that. And then with regards to Matt as an individual, 2024 is going to be a transformational year for our business of real estate. I got into real estate in 2017, worked on a team with your dad, and separated 2 years ago and started my own team. And to be completely honest, I went about it the completely wrong way. I built a real estate team in haste to try and prove to people that I could, instead of actually taking a step back and saying, okay, how do I build this? What do I do? My ego got ahead of me. I quite honestly had the fuck you, I'll prove to you I can do it attitude, and it didn't serve me. It was also at a time before I'd done a lot of healing, so I was in a very different place then. And so this year, you and I have come together, became business partners and owners and operators of the real estate team in different capacities. And we had an amazing planning session only a week ago. I think it was like 8 hours in our living room.
Yeah, a week ago today.
Yeah, we went all into it. But we figured out our 10-year plan, our vision, our business plan, our business procedures. And so 2024 for me, as part of the business, is my word is action, is to take action. Not just in real estate, but in action in other things in my life, action in health, action in wealth, action in spirituality, action in fitness, action in business, action in our relationship. And so my word for 2024 is action.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited for 2024. I'm excited for all to come, for the podcast, for our business, for our family. And I just want to thank you for letting me be the host today and allowing your listeners to get behind the curtain a little bit.
Just be in the hot seat, and Andrea can take the reins. I kind of like this.
I like it. I think
you can be the face, I'll be the voice.
That's fair. That's fair.
That is a win-win.
That is fair.
That is a win-win.
That is fair.
No, thank you, babe. And to you, this was your idea. I'd have never done this. And so I'm really glad that we did. So thank you for bringing this suggestion up and doing this. This was very much needed. So thanks, my love.
You're very welcome.
Who's your next guest?
I don't know. Maybe I'll have to think of one.
Maybe you should. Maybe we should. What do you think, guys? Should we tease this up? Should we have Andrea come and do a couple of host episodes?
I think we need a mom's episode.
We need a mom's episode.
Yeah.
Get the moms up, the bad moms up in here.
Bad moms episode. I like it. Let's do it.
Okay.
We only know pretty great moms though, so it'll have to be the great moms episode.
It'll be a great moms episode. No. Okay, my love. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you, and thank you for pushing me. I was given this idea a long time ago, and I sat on it for a very long time. And you called me out with one of the most beautiful and also fuck that hurts comment in my life, which was you sat down in front of me and said, babe, I love you, but there is nothing more unattractive than when you don't take action on something you said you would do. And you called me out on the podcast, and within a week I recorded my first episode. So thank you for calling me out. Thank you for pushing me. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for seeing in me the only things that only you see. And thank you for knowing that this podcast would be successful when I didn't think it would be.
And just think how sexy you're going to be all year long with 2024's word of action. Can't even handle it.
Don't stare too long, folks. You could get pregnant. So thank you for being my rock, my lighthouse, my lover, my wife, and the mother of my children.
I love you.
And I love you too. Thank you for listening to the Bear Den podcast. Please click subscribe and get the updates for our new episodes. And if you feel the need to reach out, you can reach me on Instagram @the Brit Bear.